this is Frontier Opening Bell, and today is the 12th of January 2021. Together, let's hit the ground running with Onyeka Ijeoma, the industrial goods analyst with Vesiva Capital Management. Thanks for joining us on the show this morning. And of course, Bosun Amofai, the executive editor and CEO of Frontier Africa Market Reports. Let's begin with the market status from yesterday, where the Nigerian market was positive marginally, 0.08% on Monday. Ivory Coast, that's BRVM, was at 135.56, negative, continues to tail spin since last week. Egypt's case was down yesterday. Some profits taken there by some 58 basis points. Kenya, which represents the Nairobi Stock Exchange, was down 0.17%. And South Africa JSE appreciated by 0.38%, remained at the 63,000 psychological position. Now, moving on to stories in East Africa. Kenya gets some 69 billion shillings reprieve under DSSI for a 6-month period. That's January 1 to June the 30th of 2021. And IMF sets tough conditions. Total debt may top some 10.5 trillion Kenyan shillings for that country. Kenya still, the central bank floats some 50 billion Kenyan shillings for a 16-year infrastructure bond. And of course, private equity firm Ascent Capital plans some 13.1 billion Kenyan shillings for regional boost. So this is a company that continues to invest massively in SMEs across the eastern part of Africa. And finally, on this region, Ethio Telecom sets contract plan scheme in motion. Well, let's get some analysis on this from Bosun, looking at the debt relief package from Kenya. Bosun, what do you make of this development? This is something that is putting that country rather, in a positive position at this point in time to help them focus more on some other developments.
I think it's good news, but not so much of a good news for Kenya. If you look at the size of the total debt that we're talking about now and the tough conditions that the IMF is giving this East African largest economy, total debt is now about 10.5 trillion naira. The IMF told the Kenyan authorities, the Kenyatta administration, to include all public sector debt, including parastatals and everything they want to see, the whole book open up on the table, nothing under the table. So that raised the whole Kenya's debt by more than 1 trillion shillings to about 10.5 trillion shillings. So it's a whole lot. Under that arrangement, then they got 69. 69 billion looks like a whole lot of money on the table, but look at it, it's just a 6-month period. So it takes Kenya between January 1st to the end of June. What happens from July 1st to the end of the year is another story. So Kenya, like Nigeria and South Africa, have been trying to get multilateral loans from the World Bank. It's been very difficult. 3, 4, 5 years ago, Kenya was saying they have nothing to do with the IMF. They can go it all alone. Now it's obvious that they cannot go it all alone. So that is one big story there. So the conditions coming from the IMF is a lesson to every other country in Africa that look, this DSSI program under the G20 or Paris Club, whatever we call it, will not come cheap and will come with very tough conditions. So everyone should just be prepared for it, and that is the big story there. The infrastructure bond that Kenya also floated is good, a 6-year paper. I'm sure Onyeka has his thoughts on the infrastructure bond. We are trying to set up an infraco in Nigeria with about 5 trillion or something like that, or 15 trillion. The central bank is trying to midwife that using the private sector window to put it together. We need something like that. It will be good. It will help to create jobs if you can get it done to the private sector and hit the ground running. Tempo.
Great. So anything to say about the Ascent Capital plans for 13.1 billion Kenyan shilling that they're trying to get us around $120 million, and they have just secured some $10 million deal with IFC, a subsidiary of the World Bank?
There's a whole lot of good business in East Africa, no matter how you look at it. The public debt, the whole election coming through in about a year or two down the line. Whether we like it or not, Kenya is an economy you cannot ignore in East Africa. Is well positioned between its neighbors, Uganda, Tanzania. To the north, you have Ethiopia and a few others. So Kenya is good business in agriculture, in horticulture. They're opening up massively on infrastructure, railways, and others between Nairobi and Mombasa and a few other places around the country. It's a major hub, which will be, again, if you look at Rwanda, when it comes to the AfCFTA and intra-African trade, they signed a deal with the British before the Brexit, on the midnight of the Brexit. They got a deal out of the UK, which would be which was a post-Brexit deal with the United Kingdom. So it's a whole lot of, so Kenya is a good place to put money in Africa, if you ask me.
Especially the eastern part as a region and as a whole, because they are much more coordinated. They're well coordinated than other regions when it comes to regionalization in terms of trade. I mean, recently I met an Indian guy here who's studying, who's doing his PhD in pharmacy. And I asked him a question, what do you intend to do afterwards? He told me specifically that his focus is on Africa. Where in Africa? He said Uganda and Kenya. I said, why? He said it is actually easier to do business in that part of the country and that he can manufacture drugs and do a whole lot with ease and get his business done seamlessly in that region. So I totally agree with you, Bosun. Quickly, let's move on to West Africa and get Onyeka to speak to the developments in that part. West African stories will have number one on Nigeria, the 4 billion naira that the federal government has made available to the aviation sector as bailout scheme. FP CEO Mr. Onyema clarified this in an interview yesterday. I don't know if you came across that interview, Onyeka. He was even explaining that this is not enough, but it's a good step in the right direction, basically. Dangote Cement, which is a listed company, and of course the market leader on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, also completes first tranche of a share buyback. And we've got Nigeria's budget 2021 breakdown today at 12 noon, midday. Senegal is to repay some 14.4 CFA, 14.4 billion CFA in Islamic bond by January the 26th. And of course, the Ghana Securities and Exchange Commission is warning retail investors specifically to beware of an illegal scheme being perpetrated by a Chinese investment firm. Onyeka, let's get your perspectives on the 4 billion naira aviation sector scheme. What do you think that will do in that sector? I mean, Mr. Onyema explained yesterday that this is not enough, but they like that step.
Yeah, so it's a very important step. The aviation industry has to be one of the worst hit sectors in the global economy. We've seen, we saw at the start of the pandemic, global flights suspended, amidst the wave of global lockdowns, across advanced, emerging, and frontier markets. Um, the Nigerian aviation industry is not even mature enough to handle the to handle this sort of sudden shock sudden shocks to their revenues. This sector has been dealing with poor aviation infrastructure. They've been dealing with very strong unionization in the aviation sector, which threatens operations very often. They've been dealing with really bad business climate in Nigeria, which threatens FDI into the country, and also consequently limits the amount of business travel in and out of the country. And this was just something that they were not prepared for. We saw in the past we've seen a lot of these companies. In the past we've seen a lot of these companies actually um, you know either shut down or have been taken over by Nigeria's bad bank Amcon due to inabilities to pay off their very expensive debts, or even their insurance premiums. And so this bailout is very important for the sector. But like the FT said, it's definitely enough. You don't need it to see this. It's not enough for the industry to get done. But we see that they are being a little more resilient than we had initially expected. Fares have been increased, but that has not significantly dented air travel. People are still just glad to be able to transact business across state lines, and across international lines too. And so yes, we see this as a positive, but he also highlighted a couple of things. He said that um, the aviation associations were pushing for VATs to be removed on domestic air travel, to be able to reduce the cost for domestic air travelers, and for the import duties to be reduced on um, the importation of aviation parts and vehicles. However, that seems very unlikely. Federal government is dealing with severe revenue shortage amidst an increasing expenditure budget due to both increasing needs, population growth, and also the devaluation of the currency. And so that is unlikely to happen anytime soon. For the Danksem buyback story, we saw that Danksem bought back about 40 million, just over 40 million units of shares from shareholders between December in December, January, in December and the start of January. And this is we know that at the start of 2021, they had gotten approval from shareholders to purchase about 10% of their share capital, of their issued and paid up share capital, which amounted to about 1.7 billion units of shares. But um, due to um, due to just changing priorities, the and also because their share price had risen, far at a level that's almost double, what it was when they received the approval. The share buyback scheme was no longer did not seem, you know, um, to make a lot of sense for the business sense for the company anymore, and so they reduced the amount that they purchased. They had planned to purchase about 80 million units, but they eventually purchased about 40 million units. It's sort of positive for shareholders who wanted to exit at this high price, but it doesn't do much to affect the valuation of the company, anyways. And on the budget story, we're seeing the federal government would give a breakdown of the FG's 2021 budget, the revised budget that has been approved. We had gotten a breakdown previously of the proposed budget, which had an expenditure of about 13.1 trillion naira. Um, Following Senate considerations, it was hiked to about 13.5 trillion naira, with a lot more emphasis on security and infrastructure expenditure. And so, we'll be getting the breakdown from the federal government, today, to see exactly what changes have been made. But just speaking on that, we can say that the budget still seems very ambitious, at least our revenue targets, in terms of the oil benchmark at $40 per barrel. That's very conservative. It's we saw that trend in 2020. In terms of our oil projections, we've been a little more realistic in our oil projections. However, our non-oil projections still need a lot of work. We see the government putting a lot of pressure on the FIRS, on the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the customs services, and expecting to generate a lot from sale of assets. We haven't gotten a lot of traction on sale of assets. The FIRS and the customs revenue agencies will continue to struggle because of the challenging climate due to the coronavirus pandemic, and so they are unlikely to meet their already ambitious target. and so we could see the FGN deficit, which is supposed to be somewhere between 4 and 5 trillion, maybe even hit around 7 to 8 trillion, eventually, which is not good news for a country that is battling with very high, debt debt service to revenue um, ratios already.
Hmm. Okay, Bosun, before we touch on other parts of the continent, which would be Southern Africa and northern part of Africa, would you like to speak to the Ghana SEC story, warning investors to beware of the illegal scheme coming from Chinese investments scheme? It looks like it is the same language that the Ghana Securities and Exchange Commission and the Nigerian Securities and Exchange Commission are using lately.
Well, the Ghana SEC warning is coming on the back of something we touched on yesterday, which was the repayment of the clients of those illegal Ponzi schemes. Some of them unauthorized, some of them not duly registered. Some of the packages were not registered with the SEC. Some of the operators could be legally registered, but they could have packages or mutual funds or so that are or investment portfolios that are not approved by the SEC. So it's different to be licensed by the SEC. It's another thing to run what to call, if you want to run a mutual fund, you have to apply to the SEC to run it, even though if you have a license as an investment firm. So you need to register every piece of security so that the SEC, the regulators can track it. So if you run in the market and you don't have that, then it's right for the SEC to flag you. I guess that's what the Ghana is doing. They're learning from what they have just suffered over the last few years and trying to prevent a recurring of that.
Hmm. Okay, let's move on now to the Southern African markets, where Angola has got some a 3 year debt relief from China and a couple of other creditors there. I understand that they've taken loans from Exim Bank, they've taken loans from Development Bank of China as well, and one other entity. In terms of virus, President Ramaphosa of South Africa has maintained his position on the tier 3 lockdown or level 3 lockdown as it is over there in the UK. It is tier 3. That's look, this is going to continue. They're going to continue to shut down their 20 borders, and of course, there's going to be a 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew. That will remain intact till the 15th of February. SA2 major refineries are to stay shut until 2022, says SATAC. And of course, AB InBev is redeeming 2.1 billion euro and some Australian dollar, 650 million Australian dollar. A profit warning or a profit warning, of course, from Botswana Stock Exchange. Sefalana sees profit between 21% and 23% higher in 6 months to October 2020. Before I go to Bosun, let me hear what your thoughts are, Onyeka, on these debts relief, which is brooding across Africa, from Southern Africa to East Africa. Anything to say as to how it relates to Western Africa, Nigeria in specific, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, from the start of the pandemic, we had already said we had said that a lot of African countries would need some debt relief packages, and we've seen the G20, we've seen the Chinese government, we've seen some other major DFIs respond appropriately to this. Angola situation is actually a unique situation because they are going through a sort of transition at the moment, and they're trying to sort of clean up their countries and clean up their books and clean up their acts. And so their new story seems to resonate a lot better with investors who are more willing to trust them and give them more extensions. We've seen that happen with the Chinese government, and the IMF is also expected to extend another loan facility to the country. And fair play to them. They're doing the new government seems to be taking their job very, very seriously. In West Africa, I know that Nigeria has stated and has reiterated that they would not be seeking debt relief. To be fair, we do need some form of debt relief, but I think where the central bank and the Ministry of Finance is coming from is that, when you start to receive debt relief, it sort of affects your credit rating. And for a country that is trying to go heavy in infrastructure, would require the confidence of foreign investors in the short to medium term, and so we can't afford to take that hit on our credit on our credit rating right now, and so we are unlikely to see that happen in Nigeria. For the rest of West Africa, I know that Ghana seems to be in a mildly decent position, given that they had completed the IMF austerity measure positions as at last year. They seem to be in a much stronger position, even though they were sort of impacted by the virus, by the pandemic. They seem to be redoing, and we're unlikely to see that. Um, we are likely to see some more debt relief packages in Ghana also. So I'm not very familiar with the rest of West African countries, but for the two major Anglophone economies there, they are holding steady on the debt front.
Don't worry, by the time some deals start coming your way from Southern Africa, Northern Africa, you'll be more familiar with that. Let's cross the bosun to get his buying on this Angola story, because I know that you're really interested in these debt relief packages, bosun.
Well, everything that has to do with Frontier Africa is interesting. Again, when you look at Angola with so much oil money, and the situation is not significantly different from Nigeria in terms of debt, in terms of corruption under the previous administration so far with Senegal, which is the state oil petroleum like our own NNPC, the former president and his daughter, Dos Santos, Isabel Dos Santos, with the corruption around the former president's son as well. So it looks like just a photocopy of the Federal Republic of Nigeria when you go down to Angola, even though in terms of size, it's much smaller by population and all that. So you expect that the oil windfall should have transformed Angola into an oasis in the desert that you find around it, from Congo DRC to Nigeria on the west and all that. So it doesn't look like that. So it's interesting that with the Chinese very much embedded in Angola is a Portuguese-speaking country and went through many, many years of a civil war, if you remember, in the 80s and all of that. The fire in Angola, the song about the insurrection, the whole rebel, the independence and what have you. So it's a country that have gone through so much problem, has been well mismanaged under the military and rule and all of that. So it's a sad story that we have two of Africa's largest oil producing countries in debt, made so much oil money in the early 2000s when oil prices were around 100, 120, $140 per barrel. Yet you could hardly see. But again, if you look at infrastructure, Angola is still some way off better than Nigeria, by the way, even though they could still do a whole lot better than that. So this dual DSSI and getting a 3-year debt relief from the Chinese is good news on one hand, but the books are not looking pretty good at all. There have been weeks and months of protests, as it were, in Angola by the citizens against how the government, the country is being run, even though the current administration is trying all its best to distance itself away from the previous administration, but it doesn't look like it's any oasis or any blue ocean anytime soon for Angola.
So let's finalize with North Africa, where the AfDB is mobilizing some $6.5 billion to Sahel's Green Great Wall projects. The Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the president of the AfDB, actually confirmed this. EFG Hermes potential buy of AI Bank to boost growth. That's also on the table. Bosin, if you're pricing this $6.5 billion Sahel Great Green Wall projects, what do you think will become of the gamut of debts that we have in that part of Africa?
Well, I think this is one great project that everyone should applaud the creativity of the AfDB and everybody involved. Again, because will be about a 5,000 kilometer wall.
5,000.
It's going to be about 5 kilometers wide and about 5,000, 8,000 kilometers long from one end of the continent to the other. The whole idea is to stop the encroachment of the Sahel desert all the way down to the rest of the continent. So what the AfDB and other agencies and governments around the world wants to do is to build this forest wall made up of trees, vegetation, and everything that is green, such like a forest. Build such a big forest that can serve as a wall to prevent the rapid expansion of the Sahara Desert all the way down to us here. It's all part of to stop deforestation, to stop the environmental issues that are beginning to threaten food security and all that in the other part of Africa. So if you look at the map, it's going to be a forest that cuts across all the way from the west in Western Sahara, Mauritania, all the way from that, all the way down to East Africa coast, all the way down to around Djibouti, whatever, all the way down there. So it's going to be thousands and thousands of kilometers and about 5 kilometers wide. That's huge enough. So it's like building a kind of the first type of artificial forest ever in history that I am aware of to stop the encroaching of the desert from the north to the southern part of the continent. So it's going to be somewhere well above Niger, Mali, up there. Won't get across to Nigeria, but to spread it. Because again, look at what has happened to Lake Chad, for example. The desert encroaching is coming through. There's a whole lot of problem there. The whole massive Lake Chad before for fishing.
These are generally sustainable development goals.
I'm telling, it's a big one. So it's a money that will be raised from investors, globally speaking, and AfDB will help sustain. And I think everyone will want to be part of that.
Right. Can I get your response to that, Onyeka, just before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I mean, like Boston said, desert encroachment has been a key problem for many African countries, especially north of the Sahara. Even here in Nigeria, we've been dealing with the desert encroachment in around the northeast and the and northwest of Nigeria. We've been dealing with the drying up of Lake Chad, which is very important to the water supply of the country. And we've gotten, I think Africa has taken, as a whole, has taken lessons from the Algeria Green Dam project, the Green Wall of China. I think China had sort of a green revolution in some parts of the country to stop this sort of thing, and it's very important because food security is a huge problem in Africa. We're looking at we're always just at the brink of famine and food insecurity in many parts of Africa. Desert encroachment is one of the key reasons. So, like Boston said, this is the project that should be supported in its full entirety.
Yeah, well, sustainable development, sustainable projects like these are some of the things that the AfDB has got on its table, and it's been championing that all across Africa. I know that the president, Akinwumi Adesina, also mentioned setting up some solar panels across the northern part of Africa, talking about the Lake Chad, Niger, and then the northern part of Nigeria, something that will help them to generate some kind of electricity, basically, and that is something that we'll hope to see coming through very, very soon as well. Onyeka Ijeoma, thanks a great deal for joining us on the show this morning. He is an industrial goods analyst with Vetiver Capital Management, and of course, Bosun Omofaye, the executive editor and CEO of Frontier Africa Reports. Appreciate your time on the show this morning. We've run out of time. We would have been able to touch on other stories that we have on the tray. I'm Temple Ashaju. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.